Welcome to the channel. What are those strange, beckoning lights on the lake in the dark? I think you'd be interested to know. Paasselkä Lake is a round, deep lake in southeastern Finland, formed by a meteorite impact. It is deep. In the central part of the lake, a magnetic anomaly has been recorded. Because of this, compasses malfunction. The most famous, unusual phenomenon is the so-called bubbles, spheres of light, which locals have seen above the water and in the surrounding swamps for several centuries. These lights sometimes behave like living beings. They follow boats, suddenly disappear, change speed and direction. He arrived at the shore long before dusk. The old fisherman Eino knew this shore better than his own jacket. Paasselkä was his home, round, dark water, full of fish and memories. But that night the air was somehow electric, the sky was clear, the stars sharp, and the forest around seemed extremely attentive. Eino set the boat, checked the nets, and sat at the water's edge, covering his face with his hand. He did not like long conversations, but he remembered his grandmother's stories. Pires, lights that sometimes came from the lake. People feared and revered them at the same time. Sometimes they were lazy, like fireflies, sometimes fast and daring, like frightened birds. Hours passed, and the moment came when the world seemed to turn upside down. Familiar sounds quieted, even the waves became softer. Eino chewed a cherished piece of bread and thought of simple things, of tomorrow, of the nets, of the weather. And then he noticed it. A tiny star descended lower, came closer to the water's surface, and suddenly his entire boat was filled with a weak, cold light. The light was not yellow, rather bluish-green, like early ice. The little flame hovered above the surface, but did not reflect in the water like stars do. It trembled, as if breathing. Eino felt his heart freeze in his chest, not from fear, but from wonder. The light rose higher and made a circle above the fisherman's head, subtly in sync with the ripples in the water. Then it seemed to speak, movement after movement. It adjusted to the rhythm of the boat and approached so that Eino could distinguish the depth of the color, and in that color, there was something watching. The little flame began to behave strangely. First, it moved along the sides of the boat, as if checking it for warmth, then slid to the bow and froze. Eino instinctively reached out. He was not seeking danger, he just wanted to touch it. His finger touched the cold light and immediately he heard, not with words, but with a feeling, as if an echo of an old song came from the lake. The song was not human, it was short, even waves, and each beat seemed to raise in memory the names of those long dead. Eino saw visions, how in the distant past a stone fell from the sky, how the water boiled from the heat, and the land changed, how people built villages, and their voices remained in the stones. When he withdrew his hand, the little flame retreated. But at that distance, it began to multiply. 2 more flared at the surface, then 5, and soon from the original point they scattered like a herd. One shot up into the sky and stopped, freezing like a star. Another slid over the water and sharply went into the forest, tracing an arc. They moved at such speed that it was hard for the eye to follow. It seemed as if someone was drawing these arcs over the world with an invisible hand. Eino remembered another legend: if the light follows you home, it means you must follow it into the night when the water itself calls. But he was a fisherman, not an adventurer. He extinguished his lamp so as not to disturb the phenomenon and listened. One of the lights suddenly stopped and looked, the way a living creature looks, long, and almost questioning. Eino felt cold and warmth penetrate his mind simultaneously. At that moment he realized, this was not a devil in the usual sense, not an evil spirit, not human mischief. It was the consequence of that great impact that once changed the earth. In the rocks and magnetic anomalies, something remained, not dead, but like the sleepy consciousness of stone and water. Sometimes it awakened and mesmerized with light. The night went on, and the lights faded as suddenly as they had appeared, as if someone had gathered them back into pockets. One remained, moving slowly toward the shore, stopping near an old stump where Eino once kept his net. It glowed stronger, barely pulsing, and in this pulse, the fisherman was pierced by a vision. He saw the face of a woman with long hair, lost among the algae, children running along the shore, a ship disappearing into the fog, and at the center, a circle that did not fit on any map. "I see, therefore I remember," thought Eino. And he understood, these lights are the memory of Paasselkä itself. They come to remind people of things that cannot be simply forgotten. When the dawn began to cast its dim light, the lights disappeared. Eino sat in the boat, trembling from the cold and awe, and felt a strange relief, as if a place for one more story had appeared in his chest. He carefully lifted the nets, and instead of the usual catch, there lay a small round pebble, dark, with a barely noticeable but perfectly round edge. He placed it in his palm, and the pebble was warm, still warm from the night. Eino never told the night exactly as he had seen it, later he spoke of it briefly. They came and went. The lake keeps them. People came and went, some saw the light, once, some more often. But in one story he was convinced forever, some places do not belong only to humans. They belong to memory. And sometimes, when the earth decides to remind itself, memory turns into light. Old Eino always woke up before the sun. Even in winter, when the night stretched like eternity, he knew, somewhere out there, beyond the dark edge of the lake, the first gray light would soon shine. In those moments he felt alive, old bones creaked, his heart grumbled, but his hands reached instinctively for the oars. The lake wouldn't let him go, as if it held him on a leash. Paasselkä lay among the forests, quiet and round like a mirror. But everyone knew, that mirror looks back. For as long as people had lived here, they whispered about the pires, lights that rose from the water at night. Whoever saw them could not sleep for a long time. Some said they were the souls of drowned fishermen, others claimed that under the lake slept a stone from the sky, breathing light. Eino remembered stories from his grandfather. "Never stare at the lights for too long," he said, "they might think you are needed." Eino listened, nodded, but didn't believe. Back then he was a boy, running barefoot in the snow, laughing at the fears of adults. And now, gray-haired, bent, with hands like dry roots, he caught himself in the evenings looking involuntarily toward the lake. That day the sky was low, heavy. The wind whipped dry snow across the ice, and the air rang with silence, real, deafening, the kind that comes only before trouble. Eino went out onto the ice to check his gear. Lately, there had been fewer fish. The elders in the village said, "The lake is offended." The young ones just laughed, "It's simply cold, that's why they're not biting." But Eino knew, it wasn't about the fish. Something was changing. Sometimes at night, if he peered out the window, he noticed, over the middle of the lake, a pale glow flared. Not like a lantern, not like a star, alive. It moved slowly, as if someone were swimming beneath the ice with a lamp. And most importantly, it cast no shadow. One day, neighbor Matty came to Eino and said, "Did you see it yesterday, glowing right over the crack?" "Maybe the northern lights," muttered Eino. "No. It moved like a boat." And there was a sound, like someone whispering under the ice. Matty crossed himself nervously. They say Seppo's son saw a fire fly to the shore and vanish right in the old barn. In the morning the door was covered in frost, as if someone had been breathing inside. Eino didn't believe it, but something tightened inside him. He tried not to show fear. In small villages, fear grows quickly, one person shivers, and the whole village whispers of a curse. The next day, as the sun set behind the forest, Eino went to the shore alone. He wanted to make sure it was all nonsense. The snow under his feet creaked, the air was so clear the stars seemed alive. He stopped at his boat, frozen in a snowdrift, and stared long at the black smoothness of the ice. And suddenly, he saw it. Right in the middle of the lake, where it should have been dark, a lamp seemed to flare. A thin bluish point, pulsing like a heart. Then a second. And a third. They spun slowly, as if dancing. Eino felt his heart beat faster in his chest. He wanted to call someone, but his voice stuck in his throat. The light grew brighter, moved faster, and now it was clear, they were rising above the ice. Floating through the air, as if searching for someone. Eino stepped back, but his feet seemed frozen to the ground. Suddenly one fire darted sharply toward him. It flew fast, leaving a tail like a comet. Eino squeezed his eyes shut, covering his face with his sleeve, but the light only increased, everything around shimmered, even the snow beneath his feet gleamed with blue sparks. He heard a quiet hum, as if someone whispered right in his ear. The words were unintelligible, but they carried something human, a call. When Eino opened his eyes again, the lights were gone. Only the smell remained, light, like after a storm, and a strange warmth on his face. He stood for a moment, catching his breath, and whispered quietly, "Lord, help me." The next morning, Eino woke not to the rooster or the cold, but to silence. In the village, someone was always moving, somewhere wood was being chopped, buckets clanged, dogs barked, echoing across the lake. But today, not a sound. Even the wind seemed to have gone to sleep. Eino listened and felt his heart thump heavily again, the lake seemed to be holding its breath. He pulled on his old jacket and stepped into the yard. The air was thick, like smoke, but it had no smell. The snow around his house lay smooth, untouched, and only the tracks of his own boots led to the shed. He looked at the sky, the sun was gone, but it was still bright, as if the very air was glowing. Through the fence appeared his neighbor Lisa. She held a bucket but walked slowly, cautiously, as if afraid the ground might crack beneath her. "Eino," she said, "did you see it yesterday?" "I saw it," he replied, not raising his eyes. "Everyone saw it," she whispered. Even old Seppo said the fire floated under his window. She lowered the bucket and leaned closer. "And in the morning, the cow didn't come out of the barn. It stands there, trembling, eyes like a human's. I brought it some grass, and it moves to the corner and moans." Eino nodded, trying not to show his worry. "Maybe it's a smell, the frost," he began, but didn't finish. Lisa cut him off, whispering, almost crying, "You don't understand. Last night, it was light in our house. From inside. As if someone lit a fire in the stove, but we didn't add any wood. I thought, my husband woke up, but he was sleeping, almost not breathing. I went to the kitchen, and the light came from there, blue and cold. Not warm." Eino sighed. He felt that the thing he feared, fear in people, was growing around him. Fear lives fast, it fills everything, like water under the ice. During the day, Maddie came to him. His face was pale, lips blue. They were at our place, he exhaled, right at the porch. 3 lights, small, spinning like moths. And then one suddenly disappeared, leaving a hole in the snow, round, even, as if someone had placed hot iron. Maddie sat on the bench, running his hands over his face. My wife screamed, the children cried. And in the morning, the dog didn't wake. It just lay by the door, eyes open, no breath. Eino fell silent. Something inside him tightened with cold. He remembered how last night the light almost touched his face. What if it had come closer? The thought flashed. We must call the pastor, Maddie said quietly. Let him pray. This isn't just lights. Something came from the water. Eino silently nodded. By evening, 3 more came to his house, old Helmi, the young man Tuomas, and the blacksmith Arvo. Their eyes were anxious, red from sleeplessness. They sat by the stove, speaking in whispers, as if afraid someone might be listening. Helmi recounted that her grandfather had seen these lights 40 years ago. Back then, they only appeared on the water, they didn't fly. But now they are searching. Her voice trembled. They are searching for us. Eino listened without interrupting. Then he slowly stood and said, Tonight, I will go to the lake. I want to know what it is. To see for myself. Don't go. Lisa cried, Don't dare. No one returned after going to see the light. But Eino had already decided. He felt that if he didn't go, the lights themselves would come to him. Better to face fear head-on. Night fell suddenly, as if someone had extinguished the sky. The forest stood dead, no wind, no rustle. Eino put on his hat, took his old lantern and an axe for courage. Each step on the snow sounded like a gunshot. Reaching the shore, he saw the ice glowing from within. Not all of it, only in one place, closer to the middle. The light came from below, as if someone moved underneath. Eino leaned closer, and suddenly the icy surface shivered quietly. Blue sparks rose from the cracks, and at that very moment, a glowing sphere rose above the surface. It was large, the size of a human head, and moved slowly, swaying as if breathing. Behind it, a second, third, fourth flashed. They emerged from the depths, as if someone under the water opened an invisible door. Eino stood motionless. The spheres floated right before him, reflecting in his eyes. Then one suddenly darted and hovered a few steps from the old man's face. He saw something in the light, like a human silhouette. A face flickered, blurred, with an open mouth, as if screaming. Eino jumped back, dropped his lantern, and it went out, leaving him alone with the lights. And then the lake spoke. Not with a voice, not words, with a rustle, a breath, a sound like a distant moan. The ice beneath his feet trembled, the air thickened, and his eyes watered from the cold. Eino wanted to run, but he couldn't. Something held him. He felt his heart beating so strongly it seemed about to burst out. Suddenly, all the lights flared at once and shot into the sky. The blinding light illuminated the village, the forest, the houses, everything. For a second, the night turned to day. And then, darkness. Complete. No sound, no wind, no breath. Eino stood alone, and only the icy steam rose from his feet, like a trace of something departed. He gazed long at the sky, where those strange, living stars had just burned. And quietly he said, "If you are from the water, do not call me again." The next morning, the village looked as if it had died. The snow lay untouched, roofs were white, smoke rose straight from the chimneys, without a breeze. No one went outside. It seemed everyone knew, something had happened. Eino woke late, with a heavy head. He had dreamed he was standing underwater, looking up through the ice at a light. But the strangest thing, in the dream he was breathing. He woke with a burning sensation, as if the lake's cold air still filled his lungs. He stepped into the yard and froze. At the gate were tracks. Small, round, like the imprints of children's palms, going from the lake to his house and back. On the snow they glowed pale blue, as if a thin thread of light burned inside them. Eino bent down. The snow hadn't melted, but it was warm. He quickly crossed himself and stepped back. An hour later, Matti ran up to him. "Did you see?" he gasped. "I saw," Eino nodded. They were at every house. Tracks. Even at the church. Matti fell silent, looking toward the forest. And the pastor, he went to the lake before dawn. Said he had to pray right where the ice was glowing. But he hasn't returned since. Eino felt a chill run down his spine. He remembered how the lights had gone into the sky at night, and thought, what if one stayed behind? By noon, people had gathered at the shore. Women crossed themselves, men stood silently, and only the children hid behind backs. In the middle of the ice, a dark patch appeared, huge, round, even, as if someone had burned the surface from within. Blacksmith Arvo touched the ice with his poker. It didn't crack, but a faint ripple ran across it, like water. People stepped back. Lisa began to cry, "It's alive. The ice is alive." Eino clenched his fists. He felt the ground beneath him breathe. The air smelled of iron, sharp, cold. And suddenly, a low hum came from beneath the ice. First quiet, then louder. The water below seemed to boil. Snow on the shore lifted in a light swirl, and everyone heard a sound. Not human, not animal, a voice. As if thousands of voices whispered at once, "Go." Someone screamed, someone ran. Children cried, women shouted. Only Eino stood, staring at the center of the lake, where the hum became a pulsating light. Suddenly he understood, the lights were neither evil nor good. They just wanted to be heard. And he stepped onto the ice. "Eino!" Matti shouted. "Back!" But the old man walked on, without turning. Each step struck in his chest like a drumbeat. The light beneath his feet grew stronger. When he reached the middle, the light flared, and the lake fell silent. For a moment, everything stood still. Then a wave of air rose from under the ice, cold, transparent. It swept over the people and vanished into the sky. And Eino remained, head bowed. Matti ran to him, but stopped at the edge of the glowing patch. The ice was hot, like metal. Inside it, a faint light pulsed, like a breath. Eino stood without moving. His eyes were open, his face calm, as if he were listening to something very far away. No one dared approach. By evening, the light under the ice faded. Eino remained standing in the middle of the lake, until darkness swallowed him. 3 days passed. The wind returned, the snow began falling again, and the tracks vanished. People tried not to speak of it, but every time the sun set, everyone hurried to close their shutters. On the 4th day, Matti finally gathered his courage. He and the blacksmith Arvo went to the lake. Where Eino had stood, there was now just a smooth field of ice. No patch, no crack. Only in the center, frozen within the ice, lay a small fisherman's hat. Matti removed his mitten, touched the ice, and felt a slight tremor. As if the ice itself responded. He quickly withdrew his hand. "Let him sleep," he said. "Let him sleep until he himself wants to wake." Since then, the village had not seen the glowing spheres again. But sometimes, especially in spring, when the ice begins to crack, a low hum can be heard from the depths. Then the elders cross themselves and whisper, "It's Eino talking to the lake." And at night, if you step onto the shore and stare long into the dark water, it may seem that beneath the surface someone is lighting tiny flames. Quiet, alive, as if calling your name. Only not everyone answers them. The story remains open. Paasselkä Lake is silent, but sometimes, on clear nights, it glows again. And no one knows whether it is calling Eino back or searching for someone new.